Thanks for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, there are at least half a dozen deaths and thousands of people lose their homes in Mozambique in the wake of tropical Cyclone Eloise. It compounded the problems of an area that was already devastated by two superstorms in 2019. Also, as Africa races to find ways to keep its progress on track whilst also dealing with the obstacles caused by the pandemic, the continent's being encouraged to strengthen its digital transformation. And communities in Congo-Brazzaville face the arduous task of fetching their water from local wells after taps run dry because of water shortages. Some can turn to buying from private suppliers, but it's a pricey option that few can afford. But first, at least 13 people were killed as a cyclone tore through southeastern Africa. Cyclone Eloise displaced thousands as it moved through the region. It affected South Africa, Botswana, Zimbabwe and Eswatini, but Mozambique was the hardest hit. Sam Bradpiece has more.
Storm Eloise began as a cyclone initially making landfall in the central Mozambican province of Sofala on Saturday, and really with quite immediate devastating effect. 8,000 people there now displaced, 5,000 homes destroyed and untold damage to crops and infrastructure as well. The provincial capital Beira saw 10 inches of rainfall in a 24-hour period and winds of up to 100 miles an hour. And you can imagine how some of the poorer areas of that provincial capital were particularly badly affected, the flimsy corrugated iron structures simply unable to withstand such weather conditions. At least 6 people have died in Mozambique, a toll that will probably rise in the coming days as relief efforts continue and the scale of the damage is better understood. Now, what you need to remember is that this cyclone really could not have come at a worse time for the country. Just last week, the UN said that in northern Mozambique there was a worsening humanitarian crisis. Couple that with the fallout from the coronavirus pandemic, which is particularly bad over the border here in South Africa. Huge kind of economic and public health fears there as well. So yes, as I say, this cyclone could not have come at a worse time.
Sam Bradby's there for us. Now, on Monday, clashes between Somali federal troops and Jubaland forces in Gedo, not far from the Kenyan border, broke out. Neither side has reported casualties, although a local doctor does claim that at least 11 people were killed. Jubaland, which is a semi-autonomous state, accuses federal forces of fatally bombing civilian homes. The government's blamed the other side. It's also accusing neighbouring Kenya of backing Jubaland. Nairobi's denied this and called for the fighting to stop.
We understand there's a conflict on the other side of the border, but it's a conflict internal to Somalia. It has nothing to do with us. We are not involved in it, and none of our forces have crossed the border to go over to Somalia. So I do not know what they are referring to, but you can take this to the bank. We are not involved in that. That's a conflict that is internal to Somalia.
Ugandan opposition leader Bobi Wine says that he remains under house arrest in Kampala despite a court ordering troops to disperse. They've been surrounding his house since January the 14th presidential election, which he lost to the incumbent, Yoweri Museveni, who's been in power since 1986. Throughout his campaign, Wine and his supporters were targeted by security forces. Wine says that the vote was fixed. Authorities said that they were worried that Wine would spark a riot if he left his home following the polls. In his ruling, the judge said on Monday that Wine's house is not a detention facility and that authorities should criminally charge him if they have the grounds. Now, as Africa takes stock of the fallout from an unprecedented year, policymakers are looking at ways to keep the continent's development on track, whilst also tackling the new risks and obstacles caused by the pandemic. The Organisation of Economic Cooperation and Development reckons that, as things currently stand, the continent's debt is likely to balloon to 70% of GDP, and that will weigh heavily on governments in need of resources to tackle the health crisis and what comes next. Well, with me now, I'm joined by the head of the OECD's Development Centre, Mario Pettini. Mario, thanks for speaking to us. Now, the economic outlook for Africa may be daunting, but that is the case as it is everywhere. And actually, the continent's one of the regions that so far seem to come out of the pandemic less badly than, say, Europe or Latin America. So what I'm trying to say is does that say anything about the urgency with which Africa has to tackle the economic damage done by 2020 and the pandemic?
Oh, absolutely. Tackling the damage is crucial for everybody. But you said a very important thing, that Africa now, and even before the crisis, was one of the regions that had the capacity to grow, which is significant because growth was not and will not be for many months in the OECD countries. It is in Asia for sure that in average in this 21st year of the millennium grow around 6-7%, but Africa did 4%. And even in general now, the economic activity is reducing 4.2% at the global level. But in Africa, it's reducing 2.6%, without mentioning the fact that the continent have reacted in certain cases very well, better than G20 countries. I'm referring to Kenya or to Ghana or to Ethiopia and Senegal. In the continent, there are some strengths, and this will be an advantage for all. The global recovery cannot exist if Africa and other locomotives like Africa will not take up.
So what should the continent's priorities be when it comes to tackling the fallout from the pandemic?
Well, what is crucial in terms of asset is industrialization. And for sure, now there are a lot of opportunity in digitalization. But digitalization strategies in Africa focus mainly on the digital sector. Now, let me be clear. The digital sector is crucial, is an engine for growth, but it will employ a limited amount of people. In the most important country where it's taking place, we count around 270,000 jobs, which is nothing in respect of the 9 million of people that in those countries are entering every day the labor market. So what is required is that digital technology are spread across all sectors, that are an opportunity for all industrial capacities and help building industrial capacity, which means an alphabetization on digital for everybody, because when you do industry, you need to interact with other economic actors, and so you need to speak the same language, and specific services, real services to support small firms, which are the bulk of the industry in Africa.
So as things stand at the moment, though, who is positioned to not be able to take advantage of the heavier investment in digital technology in Africa, should that be what the continent started to do more of?
Yeah, you're right. There are a lot of gaps in this rise to use this technology and use digital in a certain sense to leapfrog in the process of industrialization. Take rural areas. In intermediary cities and rural areas, only 35% of the population is connected. In urban African areas, it's 73%. And then only 17% of the African population can afford 1 gigabyte, which is the amount that you need in order to have a conversation like this for 2 hours. So here there is a very important technological gap, but it's not the only one. There are also social gaps, and for sure, building skills and expanding social protection schemes, in particular for women, will be absolutely crucial if we want to have a balanced development. Finally, there is a need for international and regional coordination. The Africa Free Zone is a big opportunity. In fact, all the development of Africa has been driven by internal demand that represented 69% of the growth. So the Africa Free Zones is crucial to conduct this new momentum that you may have with digitalization.
Thanks so much. Mario Pezzini there, the head of the Development Centre for the OECD. Well, water shortages in Congo-Brazzaville have reached critical levels. Problems caused by shoddy infrastructure have left communities of all walks of life without drinkable water. Some have little choice but to fetch their own from wells or, for those who can afford it, turn to expensive private suppliers. Our correspondents report.
In Masengo, a district on the outskirts of Brazzaville, taps ran dry months ago. Residents now have no choice but to fetch water from communal wells. Nancy says she walks 2 kilometers every day to fill these containers.
On a des difficultés ici, l'eau ne coule pas, on fait pratiquement 6 mois pas de l'eau et puis on reçoit des factures. Vraiment, c'est compliqué de vivre ici.
Running water is just as difficult to come by in central Brazzaville. It's been 2 months since this restaurant's supply was shut off. To avoid having to close up shop, the owner spends hundreds of euros to get his water delivered by a private supplier.
Au cours du mois passé, j'ai payé 100 000 francs de francs CFA auprès des vendeurs d'eau. Alors aussi étonnant que cela puisse paraître, je viens de recevoir ma facture. Ce qui fait rire, c'est qu'ils vous disent, en cas de non-règlement, vous devez payer des frais, des pénalités de 10 000 francs CFA.
Congo's national water company, meanwhile, says it's been doing its best to avoid shortages. It blames recurring power cuts, which it says have disrupted water production.
Dans aucun pays du monde, des usines de production d'eau potable fonctionnent à base de groupes électrogènes. Il y a ce qui est dit qui est vrai, il y a une partie qui peut être faux aussi. Chez nous, le client est roi. On peut par omission, par erreur, facturer une zone qui n'a pas d'eau. S'il y a de ces situations, il se rapproche.
Pending a permanent solution, hundreds of thousands of families face the arduous task of carrying heavy vessels full of their daily supply of water.
And that's it for Eye on Africa for now. Thanks for joining us. Do so again if you can. Take care.
فاش تسوي شي وتشوف اسنانك كذا عقب داخله تحط ايدك شي كلهن واضحات يطلع فيديو جميل.
Sold at the click of a button, wild animals captured in Africa are highly prized by the mega-rich of the Persian Gulf. It's a booming market and a disaster for biodiversity. Even if the animals survive transportation, once domesticated, they can never return to the wild.
He's very kind of skittish and scared of any loud noise. It just startles him. So those are kind of the main issues. So you see that any noise, and it's just. So I think a lot of it is the mental trauma that he's been through as well.
From Somaliland to the Emirates, we look behind the scenes at trafficking on a major scale. Don't miss Reporters on France 24 and France24.com.